The scratching of the pen against the paper sounded louder than the crystal glasses clinking around her. Elena's hand trembled, a single tear falling onto the stark white document, blurring the ink where her husband, Marcus, had already signed his name. The Christmas lights of the Thorne estate twinkled cruelly, mocking her heartbreak. "Hurry up!" he hissed, his hand resting on the waist of a woman who wasn't her. The crowd watched, some pitying, most sneering. Elena thought this was the end of her life. She had no idea that the moment that ink dried, the man standing in the shadows, the most powerful billionaire in New York, would step forward and change the fate of everyone in that room forever. The snow was falling heavily over Chicago, blanketing the city in a deceptive layer of peace. But inside the cramped apartment on 42nd Street, Elena Thorne felt nothing but a chilling dread. She stared at her reflection in the cracked vanity mirror. The woman staring back looked older than her 26 years. Her hazel eyes, once bright with ambition and love, were dulled by months of neglect and silent treatments. She smoothed the fabric of her red velvet dress. It was 3 years old, bought from a clearance rack during the first Christmas she and Marcus had spent as a married couple. Back then, Marcus had looked at her like she was the only star in his sky. He had kissed her hand and promised that one day he would drape her in diamonds. "Elena, the driver is waiting." Marcus's voice boomed from the hallway, impatient and sharp. It made her flinch. Taking a deep breath, Elena grabbed her worn clutch and stepped out. Marcus was standing by the door, checking his Rolex. He looked every bit the tech mogul he had become over the last 2 years. Tailored Italian suit, polished shoes, hair perfectly coiffed. He didn't look up when she entered the room. "I'm ready," she whispered. Marcus finally glanced at her, his eyes sweeping over the old dress with undisguised disdain. "You're wearing that?" "Again?" "It's the only formal dress I have that fits, Marcus," Elena replied softly, trying to keep her voice steady. "You cancelled the credit cards last week, remember?" "I cancelled them because you don't know how to manage money," he lied. Elena knew it was a lie. She lived on pennies, so he could reinvest every dollar into Thorne Dynamics. She had worked double shifts at a diner to pay their rent while he coded in their basement. She was the one who had held him when investors laughed in his face. But now that Thorne Dynamics had gone public and made him a multi-millionaire, the narrative had changed. In his eyes, she was no longer the supportive partner. She was a leech, a remnant of a poor past he wanted to erase. "Just get in the car," he muttered, opening the door. The gust of wind was biting, but his tone was colder. The drive to the Thorne family estate, Marcus's parents' home in the wealthy suburb of Lake Forest, was silent. The separation between the driver's cabin and the back seat was up, but Marcus spent the entire 40-minute ride typing furiously on his phone, smiling at messages that Elena couldn't see. Elena looked out the window, watching the city lights blur. She remembered the day they met. She was an orphan, raised in the chaotic foster system of Ohio, working her way through community college. He was a scholarship student with a dream. They had bonded over their lack of family support. Or so she thought. Marcus's family, the Thornes, weren't billionaires, but they were comfortably upper middle class and incredibly snobbish. They had cut Marcus off when he dropped out of Ivy League to start his company. But the moment he made his first 10 million, they welcomed him back with open arms, and immediately started poisoning him against Elena. "She's a nobody, Marcus," his mother, Cynthia, had said at Thanksgiving, loud enough for Elena to hear from the kitchen. "No lineage, no connections. She doesn't fit the image of a CEO's wife. You need someone with poise, someone like Isabella. Isabella Vance, the daughter of a real estate tycoon. Beautiful, wealthy, and constantly hovering around Marcus at every gala. "We're here," Marcus said, snapping Elena out of her thoughts. The car pulled up the long, winding driveway of the Thorne estate. It was a mansion, straight out of a magazine, decked out in extravagant Christmas decorations. 2 12-foot nutcrackers guarded the entrance, and the trees were wrapped in thousands of gold lights. Expensive cars, Bentleys, Ferraris, Maybachs, lined the driveway. Eleanor's stomach churned. This was the annual Thorne Christmas Gala. Everyone who was anyone in Chicago business would be here. "Listen to me," Marcus said, turning to her before the chauffeur could open the door. His face was serious, his eyes hard. "Tonight is important. Big investors are here. Do not embarrass me. Don't tell your sob stories about growing up in an orphanage. Don't talk about your diner days. Just smile, nod, and stay out of the way." "I never embarrass you, Marcus," she said, hurt. "I helped you build this." "You helped me survive," he corrected coldly. "I built it. There's a difference. And frankly, Elena, you've outlived your utility." Before she could process the cruelty of his words, the door opened. A valet in a red vest offered a hand. Marcus stepped out instantly, buttoning his jacket, the perfect picture of confidence. Elena followed, her legs shaking in the cold. As they walked up the grand staircase to the double doors, Marcus didn't offer her his arm. He walked 3 steps ahead, leaving her to trail behind like a servant. Inside, the heat of the house hid her, carrying the scent of pine, expensive perfume, and champagne. The foyer was packed. A string quartet was playing Vivaldi in the corner. Women in designer gowns that cost more than Elena's entire life earnings sipped cocktails and laughed delicately. "Marcus!" a shrill voice cried out. Cynthia Thorne, Marcus's mother, came gliding through the crowd. She was wearing a silver sequined gown and a necklace of sapphires that looked heavy enough to choke someone. She hugged Marcus tightly, kissing both his cheeks. "My golden boy. Everyone is asking about the merger," she gushed. Then her eyes slid to Eleanor. The smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of smelling something rotten. "Oh. You brought her." "Hello, Cynthia," Elena said politely. "Merry Christmas." Cynthia didn't respond. She simply turned back to Marcus. "Isabella is in the conservatory. She's been dying to show you the new designs for the merger. You should go say hello before the announcements start." "Announcements?" Elena asked. "What announcements?" Marcus stiffened. He adjusted his cufflinks, refusing to look Elena in the eye. "Just business updates, Elena. Go get a drink. Don't wander too far." He walked away with his mother, leaving Eleanor standing alone in the middle of the crowded foyer. She felt the eyes of the guests on her. She heard the whispers. "That's the wife? The waitress? She looks so out of place. I heard he's finally going to do it tonight." "Do what?" "Cut the dead weight." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She needed air. She navigated through the sea of tuxedos and gowns, heading toward the back of the room where the French doors led to the terrace. She found a quiet corner near a massive ice sculpture of a swan. She leaned against a pillar, trying to blink back tears. "Why did I come?" she asked herself. "Why do I stay?" Because she loved him. Because she remembered the man who used to make her grilled cheese sandwiches when she was sick. She kept hoping that man was still in there, buried under the money and the ego. "Rough night?" The voice was deep, gravelly, and carried an accent she couldn't quite place. British, perhaps, but mixed with something else. Elena jumped and turned around. Standing in the shadow of a large potted fern was an older man. He was sitting in a wheelchair, holding a glass of scotch. He had silver hair, sharp blue eyes, and a face lined with decades of hard decisions. Despite the wheelchair, He radiated an intensity that made him seem taller than anyone else in the room. He wore a tuxedo that looked older, but impeccably tailored. I'm sorry, Elena stammered, wiping her cheek quickly. I didn't see you there. I didn't mean to disturb you. You didn't disturb me, the man said. He took a sip of his drink, his eyes analyzing her, not with the sneering judgment of the thorns, but with a curious, piercing gaze. You look like you're attending a funeral, not a Christmas party. Elena let out a dry, humorless laugh. It feels a bit like one. I hate these things, the man grunted, full of peacocks strutting around, pretending to be eagles. I'm only here because my attorney insisted I make an appearance for networking. He said the word networking as if it were a curse. I'm Arthur Sterling. Elena froze. The name rang a bell, but she couldn't place it. It sounded important, heavy. I'm Elena. Just Elena? Elena Thorne, she said, the name tasting bitter on her tongue. Arthur's eyebrows raised slightly. Thorne. Ah, the wife of the prodigy, Marcus Thorne. Yes, Arthur hummed, looking across the room to where Marcus was now laughing loudly with a group of men, his hand resting casually on the arm of a stunning brunette in a gold dress. Isabella. He seems occupied, Arthur observed dryly. He looked back at Elena, noting the simple dress, the lack of jewelry, and the red-rimmed eyes. You don't fit in with this lot, Elena. That is a compliment, by the way. I know I don't, Elena sighed, looking down at her hands. I'm from a different world. I grew up in the system, foster homes. I worked for everything I have. Or I used to. Arthur's hand tightened slightly on his glass. A strange shadow passed over his face. The system? In Ohio? Elena looked at him, surprised. Yes. How did you guess? A lucky guess, Arthur said quietly. His gaze dropped to a small birthmark on Eleanor's right wrist, a crescent shape, faint but visible. His eyes widened imperceptibly. The glass in his hand shook just a fraction. Tell me, Eleanor, do you know who your parents were? Eleanor shook her head. No. I was found on the steps of a church in Cleveland. No note. Just a blanket. Arthur Sterling stared at her for a long, heavy silence. His heart began to pound in his chest, a sensation he hadn't felt in 25 years. It couldn't be. The detectives had said the trail was cold. They said she was gone. But the eyes, those hazel eyes, were the exact shade of his late wife's. And the birthmark. Before Arthur could speak, the music in the ballroom stopped abruptly. A microphone feedback squeal cut through the air, silencing the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, Cynthia Thorne's voice boomed over the speakers. She stood on a small stage at the front of the room, beaming. If I could have your attention, please. We have a very special announcement to make this Christmas Eve. A surprise that will secure the future of the Thorne legacy. Elena looked up, a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. Marcus was walking up the stairs to the stage, holding Isabella's hand. Arthur Sterling watched Elena's face, pale. Go, he whispered, his voice oddly gentle. Go face them. But remember, girl, things are not always as they appear. If you need a friend tonight, look for me. Elena nodded distractedly and stepped away from the kind stranger, moving toward the crowd. She had to know. She had to see what was happening. As she pushed through the guests, she saw Marcus take the microphone. He looked out over the crowd, his eyes scanning until they landed on Eleanor. He didn't smile. Thank you all for coming, Marcus said, his voice amplified and smooth. Tonight is about new beginnings. It's about shedding the past to embrace a brighter, more profitable future. The crowd cheered. Elena felt cold. For Thorn Dynamics to reach the next level, Marcus continued, we need strong alliances, powerful partners, and that starts with family. He paused for dramatic effect. I have realized that to lead a billion-dollar empire, I need a partner who understands this world, someone who was born for it. He turned to Isabella and smiled. Isabella and I have some news. Eleanor stopped breathing. Marcus looked back at the crowd, and then, looking directly at Eleanor, he delivered the blow. But first, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a folded document. I need to take care of some housekeeping. He stepped off the stage and walked straight toward Elena. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, leaving her isolated in the center of the ballroom. A hush fell over the room. Marcus stopped 2 feet in front of her. He didn't look sorry. He looked annoyed that he had to do this in person. He thrust the papers toward her. "What is this?" Elena whispered, her voice trembling. "Divorce papers," Marcus announced, loud enough for the room to hear. "I tried to do this quietly, Elena, but you wouldn't take the hint. Sign them. Now. Let's not ruin the party." The ballroom was so silent you could hear the snow tapping against the high glass windows. Elena stared at the papers in Marcus's hand. The bold black letters at the top screamed, "Dissolution of marriage." "Here. Now?" Elena asked, her voice cracking. "Marcus, please. Can't we talk about this privately?" "There's nothing to talk about," Marcus snapped, thrusting a gold fountain pen toward her. "I've had the lawyers draw this up for weeks. It's a clean break. You sign, you leave, and you get a settlement check." "A settlement?" Elena took the papers with shaking hands. Her eyes scanned the legal jargon until she found the figures. Her breath hitched. $10,000. "Marcus, we have millions in the bank. I worked 2 jobs to pay for the servers for Thorn Dynamics. I signed the lease on our first office with my own credit score." "That was then," Marcus said dismissively, stepping closer so only she could hear his venom. "This is now. Thorn Dynamics is my intellectual property. You are just the support staff. 10,000 is generous for a waitress with no degree. Take it, sign it, and get out. Or fight me in court and get nothing, because my lawyers will bury you." Elena looked up at him, searching for a trace of the man she had married. The man who had cried in her arms when his first code failed. The man who had sworn he loved her more than life itself. That man was dead. In his place stood a stranger in a $5,000 suit, fueled by greed and the validation of people who didn't actually care about him. "Sign it, dear," Cynthia Thorne's voice cut in from the side. She was holding a glass of champagne, looking at Eleanor with pure malice. "Don't make a scene. You don't belong here. You never did. Let Marcus be happy with someone of his own stature." Across the room, Isabella Vance watched with a smug, predatory smile, twirling a strand of her dark hair. She didn't look threatened. She looked bored, waiting for the trash to be taken out. Elena felt a tear slide down her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness anymore. It was the hot, stinging tear of humiliation. She looked around the room. Hundreds of faces, business partners, socialites, friends, watching her execution as entertainment. No one stepped forward. No one said a word. She looked at the pen. Then she looked at Marcus. "You really want this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "You want to erase me completely?" "I want a wife who enhances my brand, Elena," Marcus said coldly. "Not one I have to apologize for." That broke her. The last thread of hope snapped. Elena uncapped the pen. Her hand trembled violently. She placed the paper on the surface of a nearby waiter's tray, who had frozen in place. With a shaky scrawl, she signed her name, Elena Thorne. "There," she choked out. "You're free." Marcus snatched the papers from the tray immediately, checking the signature like a vulture inspecting a carcass. A wide, triumphant grin broke across his face. He didn't even say thank you. He turned his back on her instantly. "It's done," Marcus announced to the room, waving the papers. "The past is behind us." A ripple of polite applause went through the room, mostly from Cynthia's friends and employees who feared for their jobs. "Get her coat," Marcus barked at a servant without looking back, "and call her a cab. The driver is for guests only." Elena felt as if she had been slapped. She had arrived in a limousine and was leaving in a cab. She turned, clutching her stomach, feeling like she might be sick. She just wanted to run. She wanted to disappear into the snow and never be seen again. She began to walk toward the large double doors, her heels clicking on the marble floor, a lonely, hollow sound. "Wait!" Marcus shouted. Eleanor stopped, her heart leaping. Did he regret it? She turned around. Marcus wasn't looking at her. He was holding Isabella's hand, pulling her up to the makeshift stage. "Since we are celebrating new beginnings," Marcus announced, his face flushed with the high of victory, "I have one more announcement. Now that the ink is drying." He dropped to one knee in front of Isabella. The crowd gasped. Elena froze, paralyzed near the exit. "Isabella Vance," Marcus said, pulling out a ring box that held a diamond the size of a grape. "You are the partner I deserve. Will you make me the happiest man in Chicago and become the new Mrs. Thorne?" "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes," Isabella squealed, feigning shock as she extended her manicured hand. The room erupted in cheers. Champagne corks popped. The string quartet began playing a joyous waltz. Elena stood by the door, invisible. He had proposed to his mistress 30 seconds after divorcing his wife. The cruelty was absolute. She pushed the heavy door open, the cold winter wind hitting her face, blinding her with tears. She was about to step out into the freezing night when a deep, booming voice thundered through the ballroom, louder than the music, louder than the cheers. "Silence!" The music screeched to a halt. The cheering died instantly. Marcus, still on one knee, turned his head, annoyed. "Who the hell?" From the shadows of the conservatory, the wheelchair rolled forward. The older man, Arthur, propelled himself into the light. His face was no longer kind or curious. It was a mask of cold, terrifying fury. He rolled right into the center of the room, blocking the path between the guests and the happy couple. "You celebrate," Arthur said, his voice low but carrying to every corner of the room. "You cheer for a man who treats loyalty like garbage and greed like a virtue." "Excuse me." Marcus stood up, his face reddening. "Security, who is this cripple? Get him out of here." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Arthur said calmly. He reached into his tuxedo jacket and pulled out a phone. "Not unless you want Thorne Dynamics to cease existing by tomorrow morning." Cynthia Thorne marched forward, her nose in the air. "How dare you? Do you know who we are? This is a private party. You are trespassing." Arthur laughed. It was a dry, menacing sound. "I know exactly who you are, Cynthia. You're a social climber who spent her last liquid assets on this party to hide the fact that the family trust is empty. And you," he pointed a shaking finger at Marcus, "you are a fool who just signed away the greatest fortune in the Western Hemisphere." "What are you talking about?" Marcus sneered. "I'm the richest man in this room." "Boy," Arthur said, staring him dead in the eye, "you aren't even the richest man in your own marriage." Arthur raised his hand and pointed toward the door, where Elena was standing, frozen, her hand on the handle. "Elena," Arthur called out, his voice softening instantly. "Don't leave yet, child. The party is just beginning." The room turned to look at Eleanor. She felt small, confused, and terrified. She didn't understand what the man in the wheelchair was doing. "Who are you?" Marcus demanded, stepping off the stage and walking toward Arthur aggressively. "Get out of my house before I call the police." "Your house?" Arthur raised an eyebrow. "Interesting. I was under the impression this estate was mortgaged to Vanguard Holdings." Marcus paled. "How do you know that?" "Because," Arthur said, "I own Vanguard Holdings." A collective gasp went through the room. The color drained from Cynthia's face. "And I own Sterling Industries," Arthur continued, "and Global Tech, and the bank you hold your business loans with." One of the older investors in the back dropped his glass. It shattered on the floor. "My God," the man whispered. "That's Arthur Sterling, the Lion of London. He hasn't been seen in public in 20 years. The name rippled through the crowd like a shockwave. Arthur Sterling, one of the wealthiest men on the planet, a recluse billionaire who controlled shipping lanes, tech infrastructure, and real estate empires across 3 continents. Marcus halted. His arrogance flickered, replaced by a dawn of fear. Mr. Sterling, I didn't know you were on the guest list. If we can discuss business—" "I am not here for business," Arthur spat. "I am here for family." He turned his wheelchair toward Elena. "Come here, Elena." Elena hesitated, then slowly walked back into the room. She felt drawn to him, a strange pull she couldn't explain. She stood next to his wheelchair, looking down at him. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I told you I lost my family a long time ago," Arthur said, his voice thick with emotion. "My wife, Catherine, died in childbirth in Ohio, 26 years ago. I was away on business in Tokyo. By the time I got back, grief drove me mad. I fell into a coma after a car accident shortly after. When I woke up, my daughter was gone. The hospital records were lost in a fire. The nurses were gone. I spent 25 years looking for her. I hired every private eye, every agency." He reached out and took Elena's hand. He turned her wrist over, revealing the crescent-shaped birthmark. "The crescent moon," Arthur said, tears welling in his sharp blue eyes. "Catherine had the exact same mark. And you have her eyes. I knew it the moment I saw you by the ice sculpture. I had my team run a rapid DNA test from the glass you drank from while you were signing those papers." He held up his phone. The screen displayed a green bar. "Match confirmed. 99.9%. "Elena," Arthur said, looking up at her with a desperate hope. "My name is Arthur Sterling, and you are not Elena Thorne. You are Elena Sterling. You are my daughter." The silence in the room was absolute. Elena covered her mouth with her hand, her knees buckling. The pieces of her life, the orphanage, the lack of history, the feeling of always being lost, suddenly clicked into place. She wasn't a nobody. She was a lost daughter. "No," Marcus whispered, his face turning a sickly shade of grey. "That's impossible. She's trash. She's a waitress." "She is the sole heiress to the Sterling Empire," Arthur roared, his voice shaking the crystal chandelier. "A fortune worth $40 billion. And you—" Arthur turned his gaze slowly back to Marcus. A cruel, satisfied smile played on his lips. "You just divorced her." The realization hit Marcus like a freight train. If he had stayed married to her for 5 more minutes, just 5 minutes, until this revelation came out, he would have been the husband of a multi-billionaire heiress. He would have had access to power he couldn't even dream of. But he had forced her to sign. "Wait!" Marcus scrambled, lunging for the waiter who held the signed papers. "Give me those back. I didn't file them yet. It's not legal yet." Ah, Arthur tutted, snapping his fingers. 2 massive bodyguards in black suits stepped out of the crowd, intercepting Marcus. One of them grabbed the papers from the tray, and handed them to Arthur. Arthur held the document up. The signature is witnessed. In the state of Illinois, with the intent clearly stated in front of witnesses, this is binding. You wanted a clean break, Marcus. You got it. Arthur looked at the document and read aloud. Clause 4. Both parties waive all rights to future assets acquired by the other spouse after the moment of signing. Arthur laughed. You wrote this clause to protect your little app company, didn't you? To make sure Elena couldn't claim your future earnings. Marcus was shaking. Please. Elena. Baby? Arthur glared at him. Irony is a cruel mistress, isn't it? Because of this clause, which you insisted on, you get 0% of the sterling fortune. Not a dime. Isabella, realizing the ship was sinking, suddenly let go of Marcus's arm. She took a step away from him. Elena. Marcus ignored Arthur, pushing past the guards to fall on his knees in front of Elena. He looked pathetic. Elena, listen to me. I didn't mean it. It was the stress, the pressure. I love you. You know I love you. Tear up the papers. Please. Elena looked down at the man kneeling before her. 5 minutes ago, he had looked at her like she was dirt. He had mocked her poverty. Now he was looking at her like she was a bank vault. She felt a hand on her arm. It was Arthur. It is your choice, my daughter. You can take him back, or we can go. Elena looked at Marcus. She looked at Cynthia, who was now fanning herself, looking ready to faint. She looked at Isabella, who was pretending to examine her nails. Elena reached down. Marcus's eyes lit up with hope. She took the engagement ring off her finger, a small, modest band he had given her years ago. You said I didn't fit your image, Marcus, Elena said, her voice surprisingly steady. You were right. I don't. She dropped the ring into his open palm. I'm a Sterling, she said, testing the name. It felt strong. It felt right. And Sterlings don't settle for traitors. She turned to Arthur. Take me home, Dad. Arthur beamed, a smile that took 20 yaws off his face. With pleasure. Wait, you can't leave, Cynthia shrieked. The merger, the investment. Arthur, please, we can work something out. Arthur spun his wheelchair around one last time. Oh, don't worry about the merger. I'm cancelling the bank's line of credit to Thorn Dynamics, effective immediately. I give you 3 days before bankruptcy. Merry Christmas. Arthur signalled his guards. One of them began to push his wheelchair, and the other offered an arm to Eleanor. Together, father and daughter walked out of the ballroom, leaving Marcus kneeling on the floor, holding a cheap ring, while the reality of his billion-dollar mistake crushed him. The silence inside the Rolls-Royce Phantom was a stark contrast to the chaos they had left behind at the Thorn estate. Elena sat stunned, staring at the leather interior, clutching a glass of water Arthur had poured for her from the car's console. Are you all right? Arthur asked gently. He wasn't looking at her with pity, but with a protective intensity. I don't know, Elena admitted, her voice hollow. An hour ago, I was a waitress being divorced for being too poor. Now you are who you were always meant to be, Arthur finished. I know it is a lot to process, but you are safe now. No one will ever make you feel small again. The car glided into the private underground entrance of the Sterling Tower in downtown Chicago. They took a private elevator straight to the penthouse on the 90th floor. When the doors opened, Elena gasped. The apartment was larger than the entire Thorn mansion, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the frozen expanse of Lake Michigan. It was modern, warm, and filled with art. This has been waiting for you, Arthur said. I kept a room for you. Every house I bought, I always kept a room for my daughter. Just in case. That night, Elena didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the snow fall. Her phone had been blowing up for hours. 50 missed calls from Marcus, 20 texts from Cynthia, even a message from Isabella that read, "We need to talk, girl to girl." Elena turned her phone off. Across the city, the atmosphere at the Thorne estate was apocalyptic. The party had emptied out within minutes of Arthur's departure. The guests, sensing blood in the water, had fled to avoid being associated with the coming crash. Marcus sat in his study, his tie undone, a bottle of whiskey on the desk. Cynthia was pacing back and forth, her heels digging into the expensive rug. "Fix this, Marcus," she screamed. "Call her back. Tell her it was a prank. Tell her you were delirious." "I tried," Marcus yelled back, slamming his hand on the desk. "She blocked me. Her number is dead." "Do you have any idea what Arthur Sterling can do?" Cynthia hissed. "He controls the board of the bank that holds the mortgage on this house. He owns the suppliers for your server farms. If he pulls the plug, we are destitute." "I have Isabella," Marcus muttered, though he sounded unsure. "Her father is wealthy. Vance Real Estate has capital." "Isabella?" Cynthia laughed, a cruel, shrill sound. "Isabella Vance is a shark, Marcus. She doesn't date potential bankrupts. She dates portfolios, and yours is currently empty." As if on cue, the door to the study opened. Isabella stood there, wearing her coat and carrying her designer handbag. She didn't look devastatingly in love. She looked annoyed. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked, standing up. "Bella, stay. We need to strategize." "We?" Isabella scoffed. "There is no we, Marcus. My father just called. He heard what happened. He said Sterling is already moving to freeze assets associated with Thorne Dynamics. If I stay with you, my father's company gets caught in the crossfire. But the proposal," Marcus stammered, pointing to the ring on her finger. "We're engaged." Isabella looked at the ring, then pulled it off and tossed it onto the desk. It bounced and landed next to the whiskey bottle. "That ring was bought on credit, wasn't it?" she sneered. "I checked the receipt. Call me when you're a billionaire again. Until then, I'm not sinking with this ship." She turned and walked out. Marcus listened to the front door slam shut. He slumped back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. The next morning, the reality of Arthur's threat began to manifest. Marcus arrived at the Thorne Dynamics headquarters at 8:00 a.m. to find the doors locked. His keycard didn't work. A security guard, one he had hired, stepped out. "Sorry, Mr. Thorne," the guard said awkwardly. "Building management has put a lock on the facility." "I own the building," Marcus shouted. "Actually, sir, the building is owned by Vanguard Holdings," the guard corrected. "You lease it. And apparently there's a clause about reputational damage and missed payments. They evicted the company effectively at midnight." Marcus pulled out his phone to call his lawyer, but the screen flashed. Service suspended. He ran to the nearest ATM, shoving in his personal debit card. Insufficient funds. Arthur Sterling hadn't just sued him. He had pulled the strings of the global banking system to freeze Marcus completely out of society. It was a siege. Back at the penthouse, Elena woke up to the smell of pancakes. She walked into the kitchen, wrapped in a silk robe Arthur had provided. Arthur was there, reading a newspaper, looking more alive than he had the night before. "Good morning," Arthur smiled. "I have arranged a few things. First, we have a meeting with the family lawyers to formalize the name change and the inheritance. Second, I have hired a stylist. If you are going to be a Sterling, you need to feel like one. No more clearance racks." "Dad," Elena said, the word feeling strange but warm. "You don't have to buy me things." "I have 25 years of birthdays to make up for," Arthur said sternly. "Indulge an old man." He slid the newspaper across the table. The headline read, "Tech mogul dumped. Marcus Thorne. Divorces billionaire heiress minutes before losing empire." "The world knows," Arthur said, "and the world is laughing at him. But this is just the beginning. I reviewed your divorce settlement, Elena, the one he made you sign." "It cuts me out of everything," Elena said quietly. "It cuts you out of his assets," Arthur corrected, "but it also absolves you of his debts. And what Marcus didn't tell you, because he is a liar, is that Thorne Dynamics is millions of dollars in debt. He was using the IPO money to pay off loans. By divorcing you, he kept all that debt to himself." Arthur's eyes twinkled dangerously. "And do you know who just bought that debt this morning for pennies on the dollar?" Elena looked at her father, realizing for the first time just how terrifyingly powerful he was. "You did?" "No," Arthur grinned. "You did. I bought it in your name. Technically, Elena, you now own the mortgage on his parents' house, his car, and his company." Elena sat back, stunned. The power dynamic had flipped so violently it made her dizzy. "What do I do?" she asked. Arthur sipped his coffee. "Whatever you want." 2 months had passed. Chicago was thawing, the snow turning to slush, much like Marcus Thorne's life. He was living in a motel on the outskirts of the city. The mansion had been foreclosed on 3 weeks ago. Cynthia had moved in with her sister in Arizona, blaming Marcus for everything before she left. Marcus was unrecognizable. He hadn't shaved in weeks. His suits were wrinkled. He spent his days in frantic meetings with bankruptcy attorneys who told him the same thing: give up. But Marcus still had one card to play. Thorne Dynamics still had the code. The intellectual property was valuable. If he could just find a buyer for the algorithm, he could pay off the debt and start over. He had finally secured a meeting. A shell company, Phoenix Ventures, had expressed interest in buying the algorithm. They were offering enough to clear his name and leave him with a few million. It was a lifeline. The meeting was scheduled for 10 Nobuesa M. at the Sterling Tower. Marcus hated the location, but beggars couldn't be choosers. He walked into the glass-walled conference room on the 40th floor, smoothing down his tie. He tried to project confidence, but his hands were shaking. 3 lawyers in grey suits sat on one side of the long mahogany table. "Mr. Thorne," the lead lawyer said. "Please, sit." "I have the code key here," Marcus said, placing a USB drive on the table. "It's fully patented. It's worth 50 million, easily. I'm willing to let it go for 20. "We aren't here to discuss the price, Mr. Thorne," the lawyer said. "We are here to discuss the surrender of assets." "Surrender?" Marcus frowned. "I'm selling, not surrendering. The buyer has acquired the controlling interest in your outstanding loans," the lawyer explained. "According to the terms, if you cannot pay the full principal today, which we know you cannot, the buyer has the right to seize all IP collateral. That includes the code." "That's illegal." Marcus stood up. "Who is this buyer?" "Phoenix Ventures. Let me talk to them." "The CAO of Phoenix Ventures is on their way," the lawyer said, checking his watch. "Ah, here she is." The double doors at the end of the room opened. The sound of sharp, confident heels clicking against the floor echoed in the silence. Marcus turned, ready to beg, ready to charm, ready to do whatever it took. "Look, I'm sure we can work out a—" His voice died in his throat. Walking into the room was a woman who looked like Elena, but she wasn't the Elena he knew. The Elena he knew wore oversized sweaters and apologized for taking up space. This woman was wearing a tailored white power suit that fit her like a second skin. Her hair, once pulled back in a messy bun, was now a sleek, glossy cascade down her back. She wore diamond studs in her ears and a Patek Philippe watch on her wrist. But the biggest change was her eyes. They were cold. Steel. She walked to the head of the table and sat down. She didn't look at the lawyers. She looked directly at Marcus. "Hello, Marcus," she said. Her voice was calm, commanding. "Elena," Marcus whispered, gripping the back of his chair. You're the buyer?" "I am Phoenix Ventures," she corrected. "And I'm afraid I have some bad news about your code. My analysts looked at it. It's inefficient." "Inefficient?" Marcus spluttered. "I wrote that code. It's genius." "It's outdated," Elena said, flipping open a file. "I hired a team of developers from MIT last week. They rewrote your entire backend in 3 days. It runs faster, cheaper, and better. Your code is worthless, Marcus. I don't want to buy it." Marcus felt the room spinning. Then why are we here?" "Because," Elena said, leaning forward, "you still owe me $12 million. "I don't have it," Marcus screamed. "You know I don't have it. You took everything." "I took nothing," Elena said. "I simply bought what you threw away. You threw away your marriage. You threw away your honor. And you threw away your solvency." She slid a single piece of paper across the table. "This is a job offer," Elena said. Marcus blinked. "What?" "I'm feeling generous," Elena said, her voice dripping with ice. "I'm acquiring Thorn Dynamics as a subsidiary of Sterling Industries. I need someone to manage the legacy servers in the basement. It pays minimum wage, no benefits, but it will keep you out of debtor's prison." Marcus stared at the paper. It was a janitorial and maintenance contract. "You want me to be a janitor? In my own company?" "It's not your company," Elena said sharply. "It's mine. And frankly, Marcus, you're lucky to even be in the building. Do you want the job or not?" Marcus looked at the lawyers. They were stone-faced. He looked at Eleanor. She wasn't bluffing. Marcus choked back a sob. His pride was battling his survival instinct. "I'll take it." "Good," Elena said, standing up. "Report to the basement. You start in 10 minutes. And Marcus?" He looked up, broken. "Don't be late," she said. "I hate tardiness." Elena turned and walked out of the room, her head held high. She didn't look back. She didn't feel the need to. The man who had haunted her, who had made her feel small, was now just an employee in the basement of her life. As she walked toward the elevator, she saw Arthur waiting for her. He was beaming with pride. "How did it feel?" he asked. "It didn't feel like revenge," Elena said, surprised by her own feelings. "It felt like business." "That's my girl," Arthur laughed. "Now come on. We have a gala to attend, and this time you're not entering through the service door." But the story wasn't over yet. As they stepped into the elevator, Eleanor's phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You think you've won, little girl, but you forgot one thing. The Sterling closet has skeletons too, and I just found a big one." Elena frowned, showing the phone to Arthur. Arthur's face went pale. The joy vanished from his eyes. "Who is this?" Elena asked. "I don't know," Arthur lied, but his hand was trembling again. "Ignore it." But Elena couldn't ignore it, because attached to the text was a photo of Arthur 20 years ago, shaking hands with a man who looked exactly like Marcus's father. And in the background of the photo, holding a baby that looked suspiciously like Elena, was Cynthia Thorne. The elevator ride up to the penthouse felt like a funeral procession. Elena clutched her phone. The image of Cynthia holding her as a baby burned into her retinas. Arthur was silent, his jaw clenched so tight, a muscle feathered in his cheek. When the doors opened, Elena didn't go to the window to admire the view. She turned on her heel and held the phone up to Arthur's face. "Explain," she demanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it had the weight of a judge passing a sentence. You said I was lost. You said the records were burned. But here is Cynthia Thorne holding me when I was 3 days old. She knew who I was. Arthur sighed, a sound that seemed to rattle deep in his chest. He rolled his wheelchair over to a hidden wall, safe behind a painting, punched in a code, and pulled out a weathered leather file. I didn't lie to you, Elena, Arthur said, placing the file on the table. I said I lost you. I never said I didn't suspect who took you. Elena opened the file. It was filled with private investigator reports dating back 20 years. Photos of a younger Cynthia Thorne in a nurse's uniform. Bank statements showing large cash deposits into Cynthia's accounts from an offshore shell corporation. Cynthia wasn't just a socialite, Arthur revealed, his voice dark. 26 years ago, she was the head nurse at the private clinic where Catherine gave birth to you. When Catherine died, I was in a coma. Cynthia was the one who signed the death certificate. She was the one who handled the transfer of the deceased infant. She stole me, Elena whispered, horror dawning on her. Why? If she knew I was a sterling, why throw me in an orphanage? Why not ransom me? Because a ransom is a one-time payment, Arthur said. Cynthia wanted the empire. He flipped to a page in the file labeled Operation Long Game. She put you in the foster system, but she didn't abandon you. Look. Elena stared at the documents. There were school records from her childhood in Ohio. At the bottom of every report card, there was a signature of a guardian ad litem, C. Vance. A fake name, but the handwriting was Cynthia's. She tracked you, Arthur explained. She made sure you went to that specific community college. She made sure Marcus, her own son, transferred there after he dropped out of the Ivy League. She engineered your meeting. Elena felt sick. She grabbed the edge of the table to steady herself. The coffee shop, where Marcus and I met. He spilled his drink on me. He said it was an accident. It wasn't, Arthur said. Cynthia coached him. She raised Marcus to be a charming predator. The plan was simple. Get her son to marry the lost heiress. Once you were married, Cynthia would discover your true identity. As your husband, Marcus would have legally controlled your inheritance. They would have taken Sterling Industries from the inside. But they divorced me, Elena said, confused. Why? Because Marcus is an idiot, Arthur barked a laugh of disbelief. And Cynthia is greedy. They got impatient. Marcus started making his own money with Thorne Dynamics, and his ego got too big. He thought he didn't need the long con anymore. He thought he was a genius who could trade up for Isabella. He didn't realize that by divorcing you, he was throwing away a $40 billion lottery ticket that his mother had spent 20 years setting up. Elena paced the room, her mind racing. The betrayal was absolute. Her entire romance, the love she thought had been real, was a script written by a woman who viewed her as livestock. Where is she? Elena asked. She's at the airport, Arthur said, checking his watch. My security team has been tracking her. She's trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands with the last of the liquid cash she stole from Marcus's company accounts. Stop the plane, Elena commanded. Arthur raised an eyebrow. I already have the police on the way, but no police yet, Elena said, grabbing her coat. I want to look her in the eye. I want her to know that the orphan she tried to use just cancelled her ticket. The private VIP lounge at O'Hare International Airport was quiet, filled with the soft hum of luxury. Cynthia Thorne sat in a leather armchair, sipping a martini, her leg bouncing nervously. She had a new passport in her purse and a suitcase full of jewelry. She was escaping the wreckage of her son's life to start over on a beach. Final boarding call for Flight 808 to Grand Cayman, the announcer said. Cynthia let out a sigh of relief. She stood up, smoothing her skirt. Goodbye, Chicago. Goodbye, failures. She walked toward the gate, handing her boarding pass to the attendant. The attendant scanned it. A red light beeped. Denied. Try it again, Cynthia snapped. The attendant typed on the keyboard, frowning. I'm sorry, ma'am. This passport has been flagged. It's been reported as stolen. Stolen? That's ridiculous. I am Cynthia Thorne. Actually, a voice came from behind her. You're Cynthia Miller. Your nursing license was revoked 20 years ago, wasn't it? Cynthia spun around. Elena stood there, flanked by 2 airport security officers and Arthur Sterling. Elena wasn't shouting. She looked calm, almost bored. Elena! Cynthia gasped, her face draining of color. She looked for an escape route, but Arthur's wheelchair blocked the main exit. You thought you could leave? Elena asked, stepping closer. After you stole my life? After you treated me like an investment portfolio? I don't know what you're talking about, Cynthia hissed, though her eyes darted around in panic. Marcus treated you badly, not me. I tried to tell him to stay with you. You told him to stay because you weren't done cashing me in, Elena corrected. She pulled the photo from her pocket and held it up. You held me before my mother's body was even cold. You stole a baby. The people in the lounge were staring now. Cynthia's facade cracked. Her face twisted into a snarl. You should be thanking me, Cynthia screamed, dropping the act. I saved you. Your father was a comatose wreck. I gave you a life. I gave you a husband. Marcus loved you, in his own way, until you became so boring. You didn't give me a life, Elena said coldly. You gave me a script, and I'm rewriting the ending. Elena turned to the security officers. This woman is in possession of funds embezzled from Thorne Dynamics, which is now a subsidiary of Sterling Industries. She is also the primary suspect in a 26-year-old kidnapping case. You can't prove that, Cynthia shrieked as the officers moved in, grabbing her arms. I have the DNA, Arthur said, his voice booming. I have the flight logs, and I have the testimony of the doctor you paid off, whom my team found in Florida this morning. As the handcuffs clicked around Cynthia's wrists, she looked at Elena with pure hatred. You're just like your father, cold, heartless. No, Elena said, leaning in close so only Cynthia could hear. I'm worse. Because I learned from you. They dragged Cynthia away, kicking and screaming, destroying the last shred of dignity the Thorne name had. 2 hours later, Elena returned to the Thorne Dynamics building. She took the elevator down to the basement. The air was stale, smelling of cleaning chemicals and old electronics. In the corner, wearing a grey jumpsuit, Marcus was mopping the floor. He looked up when he heard her heels. His eyes were red, his spirit completely broken. He had heard the news about his mother's arrest on the radio. He stopped mopping and leaned against the wall, looking at Elena. He didn't beg this time. He just looked tired. Did you know? Elena asked him. Did you know she set us up? Marcus shook his head slowly. No, I really loved you, Elena. In the beginning, before the money, before the pressure. I really did love you. Elena looked at him. She believed him. He wasn't the villain. He was just weak. A pawn raised by a monster. You're fired, Elena said. Marcus flinched. What? But I have nowhere to go. You're fired as a janitor, Elena clarified. She reached into her bag and pulled out a key. This is for a small apartment in Ohio, and a job offer at a tech repair shop in Cleveland. It's not much. It's a normal life. No billions, no galas, just a job and a home. Marcus took the key, his hands shaking. He looked at her, tears welling in his eyes. Why? Because unlike your mother, Elena said, turning to leave, I don't destroy people for sport. Go to Ohio, Marcus. Find out who you actually are when you aren't trying to be rich. She walked toward the exit. Elena, he called out. She paused but didn't turn around. Thank you, he whispered. Eleanor walked out of the basement and into the lobby where Arthur was waiting. The sun was setting over Chicago, painting the sky in gold and purple, the colors of royalty. Is it done? Arthur asked. It's done, Elena said. She took a deep breath. The weight of the last 3 months lifted off her shoulders. She wasn't the waitress. She wasn't the victim. She was Elena Sterling. What now? Arthur asked, gesturing to the city that lay before them. We have a board meeting tomorrow and a charity ball on Friday. Elena smiled, linking her arm through her father's. Let's go, she said. I have a lot of work to do. And that is how Elena went from signing divorce papers in tears to running the empire that owned her ex-husband. It's a reminder that sometimes rock bottom is just the solid foundation you need to build a castle. Elena didn't just get revenge, she got justice, and she did it without losing her soul. If you enjoyed this story of karma, betrayal, and ultimate redemption, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and subscribe and hit the bell icon so you never miss our next story. What would you have done in Elena's shoes? Would you have forgiven Marcus? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.